Hey, welcome. And I guess it would be good morning for me, but y'all might be watching this at night. So good day, good evening to you. I am Dr. Maggie, your professor. I use these videos to just sort of share information, and so you can see a living person is behind everything you're doing. I want to just use this as a moment to kind of not only welcome you to the course, but give you an idea of my thinking behind the course, right? There's going to be a lot of different ideas that we deal with. You will notice from looking over the syllabus that almost everything we're doing in reading is going to come from looking at things in ancient Greece and ancient China. I do this because I believe that a lot of the ideas that we have today that are very much, and most people know this, very much related to sort of a lineage from these ancient schools and ancient thinkers. They've evolved and come to us, but we're so used to using them, and a lot of times we don't know where these notions come from. And what I find is when you study the ancients and you do so in a way where you're pondering and considering our own time and our own place, you begin to realize that while we may be able to say these are our ancestors, this is the lineage out of which, European or Indian or African or Chinese thought originally arose, you discovered that those are different people because they're from a different place and a different time. They may be our ancestors, but we're separated by most of these people by 2.5 millennia, 2,500 years, right? And that's a huge gap, and also not only separated in time, but separated in region or place, so that that has also an aspect of how people respond to the world when they think about it, and they're trying to or they're wanting to build a better way of living, or a way of living that's more secure, that has more certainty to it. Well, when you do this comparison and contrast, you really kind of get a new idea of how you get a new, excuse me, view of how these ideas that we use arose originally. And that actually kind of gives you new information. It gives you a new viewpoint on some of these ideas. For instance, the atom. The atom, atom, we all know from our physics. We all know from popular culture. It's just a concept that's all over the place. All material things are made up of atoms, right? We use this in physics. We use it in chemistry. We use it actually in all of the sciences. It has some kind of an effect. Well, the notion of atom arose in ancient Greece as a response of a couple of thinkers to previous thinkers who were themselves attempting to describe and to talk about, how the world is structured, what makes the world up, etc. The word atom means indivisible, right? So the Democritus, one of the first people to put forward the concept around 400 BCE, right? So that's a long time ago. That's 2,400 years ago. Uh, he put it forward with the idea that the atom is indestructible, indivisible, right? Atom, not divisible. The Latin equivalent would be individuum, from which we get the word individual, right? Undivided. So the atom is that which cannot be cut up, right? But of course, if you've had even rudimentary high school physics, you know that atoms, or chemistry, you know that atoms are actually divisible. That's the whole point of the atom bomb, right? Is that there's so much energy that can be produced by dividing an atom, by splitting an atom. right? Which is not supposed to be possible according to the old ideas, right? So the more that we kind of look at that notion, and that's one of the ones that we're going to look at probably toward the middle of the semester. Uh, the more that we look at that notion from where it arose, the more we get a better understanding in our own lives, the way that we use it in our own lives. So that's the reason we're going to be looking at these ancient things. It's also to show you that one thing that comes out of studying uh, the lineages of our ways of thinking is we begin to realize too that a lot of the times the places from which ideas come, even sociologically, are so radically different. Like, I realize that everybody who's in this course is not necessarily uh, from the United States, let alone from Texas, right? You may have come from another country here, or you may be taking a class here, but you're not born and raised in Texas. These things matter, where you come from and the sort of way that the circumstance of where you come from helps you to become who you are. Okay. And so therefore, uh, just to kind of think about this, and for a contemporary Texan, individualism, or sort of the reduction of reality down to what benefits the individual and how the individual is able to succeed and flourish inside of a community made up of individuals, right? There's that word individual, which I said means undivided, which is the Latin equivalent of atom, right? And so you could say here that Texas is a place in which people see themselves as individuals in a collective. So see themselves as social atoms in a big mass grouping of social atoms, right? Uh, and so we have this individual concept in Texas that is very fundamental to the way we think about the world. Well, interestingly enough, that is one of the things kind of born out of Socrates' philosophizing. So I'm starting us off by reading the Apology of Socrates, because which Plato wrote as a kind of witness to the trial. Um, because I want you to see sort of where this glimmer of the individual. And that's important because for the ancients, especially the Greeks, the Indians, and the Chinese, the world, the basis of being human was communal, right? So what the emphasis was put on was the shared communality, right? Uh, Not the individual above everything, but the community above everything. Now, obviously, our philosophical position that we want to start working toward is how can you be an individual? How can you be a person inside of a collective, inside of a group, and not lose yourself? But also, how can you belong to a collective or a group that you don't undermine just so you get ahead? Right? So it's always going to be this tension. And so when we're looking at a lot of the text that we'll be looking at here, one of the things that will kind of come forward for you as a Texan, that a Texan or someone residing in Texas or someone studying in a Texas school, is that the idea of the individual is paramount. Right? It's not to say the community doesn't matter, but it's just that community exists to benefit the individual, right? But among the ancient Greeks, who are the first people we'll be looking at, the entire community exists, right? Uh, for the individuals and the people in a community exist to be communal and to uplift the community, right? So already we're just by reading the Apology of Socrates, you're seeing the tension between community and individual, between collective and person. right? Collectivity and personality or personhood. Um, we have to be really careful. So you're asking, well, so what's the purpose of that? Well, because we have to be careful not to impose the way we look at the world onto the things that we read that come from a different time or a different place. What we really want to do is we want to come into contact with a different way of thinking, a different way, which basically is a different way of seeing the world and seeing ourselves. Come into contact with that, and rather than just translate it and appropriate it and make use of it without giving it the respect uh, the openness it deserves, we want to come into contact with it and let it help us challenge how we see the world. Now, there are some people who they just don't want to do that. They don't want to challenge their view of the world. They don't want anybody coming in and saying, have you ever really questioned why you believe this, why you do this, or any of that? Well, I do understand that. And because it is a philosophy class, we will respect people who want to make that argument, but you will have to still challenge the way you think if you want to show that you're really here at university to do more than just get a better job. Now, again, there are people who will be like, well, why else would you go to school? I'm only here because I got to get a job. And believe me, Dr. Maggie, I'm only in this class because it's required, right? For me, the idea of going to you spending the money to go to school is that I'm going to be able to make more money and I'm going to have a better position in the world. That's all fine. That's great. Okay. If you have that position, that's wonderful. But in a philosophy class, that's going to be constantly challenged. Just like religious presuppositions are going to be constantly challenged. All right. You have to learn to challenge your own way of thinking. What I find interesting in the last decade has been the amount of people who I meet who say, you need to learn to think for yourself. And then they turn around and the next thing they say is just something that they learned from, that they picked up from their, favorite politician, or they picked up from their favorite pastor or their favorite priest. And they've not been critically engaged with it at all. They're just, a conduit, right? You might as well be not talking to them, but talking to the person that taught them this. Okay. So it's interesting that many of the people who I have encountered in these kind of classes, who will say, you need to do your research, you need to think for yourself. Once you begin to push on okay, fine, let's challenge, they fall back into positions of parroting, and that's kind of what it is, parroting what they were told by an authority figure they respect. I don't want you to just parrot anything I say. And I want you to understand this. The only thing I'm trying to convince you of is that you need to think for yourself and you need to challenge the things that you believe in that you've never fully thought through. Okay. That's all I'm trying to persuade you about. I'm not going to persuade you to take my worldview. I'm not going to attempt to persuade you to do or to think anything. We're gonna lay out some ideas. You're gonna hear what I think about stuff. And I'm not offering proofs. I'm not offering persuasive arguments. I am merely attempting to teach you how to engage critically with the world, okay? Engage critically with your own belief system, and and then learn how to describe what you're experiencing before you go immediately to explanations, which often are simply picked up from a teacher or a preacher or a politician or a business person or even an artist who's just said this is the way the world is. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to be doing. We will look at a lot of popular culture as well, and you are welcome in any of the discussions we do to bring in your favorite popular culture. I have picked three, I guess you'd call them sagas, in popular culture that we'll touch base on, right? Now, you'll hear me make lots of references to Star Wars. Even in my dissertation, there's an entire chapter devoted to talking about Star Wars. So, and I've been watching Star Wars and immersed in Star Wars since opening weekend in May 25th, 1977. So I've done it. The only thing that I've done longer than Star Wars is, I guess, been sort of a fan of Star Trek, but I'm really immersed in Star Wars and I find it's very helpful. Now, I understand that not everybody watches it, not everybody likes it, but it's got enough of a popular culture impact that we can talk about it, and, get some insights about our own situation from Star Wars saga as a work of literature. We'll also look at the Matrix saga. There's four Matrix films right now. The Wachowski siblings are in the middle, I believe, of the fifth one. Uh, and so we'll look at that one from time to time. And then finally, the last one that we'll kind of take a look at is the Twilight Saga by Stephanie Myers. I realize that that's a movie that's sort of been that has been very, in a sense, it's a gender split. Maybe Star Wars is too, because of the way that gender is often uh, codified in our culture. So science fiction and Star Wars stuff is for guys, and Twilight is for gals. And of course, anybody who is a woman that watches Star Wars will say that's not true, and anyone who's a guy that actually got something out of Twilight will say that's not true, right? And so, and so that's right. That's right, because it's not actually the case. It's only a sociological convention that guys seem to be more seem to be more interested in science fiction fantasy, and gals seem to be more interested in basically what you'd call uh, romantic fiction, right? That's a sociological convention. That's a place to challenge, right? As it stands now, I don't think these things hold up as well as they did before. These kinds of stereotypes, right? So we'll look then at, again, this Matrix saga by the Wachowski siblings. We'll look at the Star Wars Skywalker saga, and bring up references to that, and we'll do the Twilight saga. And one of the reasons I'm doing Stephanie Meyer's Twilight saga is the uh, the sort of beautiful thing that happened with all of this technology is that quite a few people who are real, authentic philosophers, they don't have academic jobs, which is actually the way things were more 300 years ago. Right? There's academic philosophers are kind of like really people who teach intellectual history, which is kind of what I'm doing. But really philosophizing, right, is you don't have to be an academic. And so one of the things that happened with YouTube and Vimeo and all these different platforms that allow people to do video essays, is that there are a lot of great people out there doing excellent philosophical video essays. One of these people is a woman named ContraPoints, or who goes by ContraPoints, and she did an excellent, just absolutely excellent video essay on the Twilight Saga about 6 or 7 months ago. So I was kind of excited to work this into to what we're doing towards the end of the class, right? And then throughout the period of the class, besides doing your little reading quizzes and doing your discussions, there'll be a few projects that we're going to work on, which will actually be that are actually being assigned to help you learn how to challenge the way that you think about the world, right? And I'll get into more of those things in future videos. I think really this is probably good enough just to sort of give you an idea of what the heck we're up to. I hope that you are enjoying reading The Apology of Socrates. Remember that the quiz, which I've accidentally deleted but have now gotten up. Remember that the quiz is basically just for reading comprehension. You have 5 attempts to get a perfect score on it, and that's to help you learn the material by going back and correcting your mistakes, right? So that reading quiz is coming up. And then next week, there's a couple of chapters of a book that I'm in the middle of writing that I'm sharing with you. And we'll do our first discussion board where you'll introduce yourselves to each other and to me. Okay. So this is kind of just to get us going. I'm going to have a video that I'm going to put up, uh, another video that I'm going to put up probably on Monday or Tuesday, which is going to be. Uh, Supplementary to the whole process of what we're doing, and it's going to be on failure and success. And I'm going to leave you now with my definition of philosophizing, and I want you to kind of think of this, just be pondering what this definition of philosophizing might have to do with how we as 21st century Texans, Americans, people from all over the world, human beings, as 21st century human beings, what does this definition of I'm going to give you a philosophizing have to do with our approach to failure and success? And my definition of philosophizing is the willingness to be uncertain and the will to question. Philosophizing is the willingness to be uncertain and the will to question. So I want you to ponder for yourself, maybe even write a little paragraph. What the heck could that have to do with a philosophical consideration of failure and success? And so now I'll leave you with what has become my standard goodbye to students. I love you for everything you have experienced through yesterday to become you. I love you for everything that you will have brought with you today to be you. I love you for everything that you're going to discover about yourself tomorrow to become you. You matter to me. You matter to the people in your life, and you matter to the world. And I will hopefully be hearing from some of y'all, and you'll definitely be seeing me around in these videos. Bye bye.